I never thought the day would come when I'd become invisible in the very home I carefully maintained, corner by corner. Yet it happened, slowly, quietly, like a photograph fading under the sun. No one in the family noticed, but every glance, every offhand comment slowly pushed me to the margins of my own life. My name is Linda. This morning, when I placed a plate of freshly baked cookies on the kitchen counter, my daughter, Amber, who just turned 16, barely raised an eyebrow toward her best friend and casually said, "Mom, can you please stop hovering? We're trying to study." The words hit like a rock. I still smiled, pushing the plate toward them. "I just thought you girls might want a snack." Amber shook her head, not even looking up from her book. "Mom, seriously, who even moms like this anymore? You're always baking, like it's some 1950s movie or something." I caught the uncomfortable glance from Chloe, her best friend, as she reached for a cookie. At least someone still knew how to be polite. "Your mom's cookies are actually really good," Chloe said softly. "Yeah, well, that's all she really does. Dad says she's lucky he makes enough so she can just hang out in the kitchen all day." Amber replied in a flat tone, as if I wasn't standing right there. That comment sliced through me like a cold, thin blade. But I didn't show it. I wiped the counter and nodded like everything was just fine. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Daniel, my assistant, updating me on the progress of a company acquisition. I quickly slipped it back into my jacket. "I'm heading out for a bit, got some errands. You girls be careful." Amber didn't even look up, just waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, sure. I'm sure you're super busy with stuff." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, exhaling deeply, like I was releasing 100 pounds off my chest. If Amber only knew, I wasn't heading to the grocery store like she assumed, but to my private office downtown, where I was running a tech empire and preparing to acquire one of the industry's top companies. Who knows what she'd say? They know nothing. All they see is a woman who cooks, does laundry, makes dinner, and keeps everything at home running. To them, that's all I am. Amber once told her friend I spend all day watching cooking shows and trying to copy recipes. Well, that's not entirely wrong. I did learn to make mousse from one of those episodes. But I was also closing an investor deal in Silicon Valley at the same time. And Brian, my husband? He proudly calls himself the provider, the breadwinner, the one steering the ship. He's never asked how the bills are always paid on time or who bought Amber that new laptop when his credit card was maxed out. I've played the role of the perfect wife for so long, even I started to forget who I really am. But not anymore. Because when a $32 million contract is waiting for my signature, one that will send waves through the industry, Amber's snide remarks and Brian's dismissive glances no longer carry weight. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I pulled into the private parking garage. The office nameplate, LM Holdings, glinted under the sunlight. Its glass walls reflected a woman who no longer wore a flour-stained apron, but one silently commanding an empire. And I'm ready for the day they find out the truth. But before that happens, I still have a few more batches of cookies to bake. The lazy housewife is about to show them who's really holding this family together. My office sits on the 29th floor of a glass high-rise in downtown Austin, Texas. From up here, the cars below look like ants, people like dots on a board. Up here, I'm not the overlooked mother, not the wife tagged with the word lucky. Up here, I'm Linda Morgan, CEO and founder of Orion Ventures, one of the fastest-growing private tech firms in the country, and the secret force preparing to acquire Cybernova Inc., the leading name in artificial intelligence. They still haven't figured out who's behind the acquisition, right? I asked as I walked in, removing my sunglasses and coat. Ethan, our chief strategist and my longtime business partner, sat waiting with 2 coffees. He raised an eyebrow and grinned. "No suspicion at all. Cybernova's exec still thinks it's some anonymous New York investment group. Pretty sure he never imagined the person behind it all was a mom who bakes." I gave a small smile, settled into my chair and glanced over the screen. The latest email read, Final negotiation round approved, 68% equity acquisition of Cybernova. One more step, and everything I've built in silence over the past 7 years will reach its peak. And you're sure there's no trace back to Orion as the parent company? I asked without taking my eyes off the data. Positive. Shell companies, bridge funds. Everything is clean. We're still a ghost, Ethan replied, placing a folder on my desk. But there's something else. It seems Cybernova's chairman, Derek Vaughn, is getting suspicious. He started probing through our intermediary bank. The name Derek Vaughn sent a chill down my spine, but I quickly regained composure. He was the type of man who believed women shouldn't be at major deal tables. I still remember the first time I met him at a tech summit in San Diego. I posed as a small-time investor pitching a new algorithm idea. Derek laughed in front of the entire room and said, "You should stick to taking care of your family. This stuff isn't for cookie-baking moms." I smiled and remembered every word. If he digs too deep, we could be at risk. Ethan nodded. Should we go public? Hit them with a direct strike? I paused, then shook my head. Not yet. I'm not ready for my family to know. Amber and Brian still think I just scheduled dental appointments and changed paper towels. I let out a dry chuckle, but my eyes stayed sharp. When the truth comes out, I don't want them just shocked. I want them to reflect. Ethan stood. Understood. I'll make sure everything stays on course. But one more thing. Derek's planning a closed-door shareholders meeting this Friday. Sounds like he's getting ready to make a move first. I leaned on the desk, my gaze cutting through the glass. Friday? Good. Schedule Orion's board meeting that morning. And Ethan, invite Derek Vaughn. He likes surprises, doesn't he? Ethan chuckled and nodded, then exited the room. I leaned back in my chair, watching the project maps glowing on the big screen. Each dot was a deal I closed, each line a strategy executed in the shadows. For 7 years, I'd been both the mother who never missed dinner and the woman signing million-dollar contracts during lunch breaks. No one asked, no one suspected. And that's been my greatest advantage. The phone rang. Julie, my assistant, calling from downstairs. "Ma'am, Brian just called. He said he'll be home late tonight. Big meeting. Oh, and he asked if you could iron a few new shirts for him." I checked the time. 3:47 p.m. Thank you, Julie. Tell him I'll take care of it. As always. I hung up, picked up a pen, and wrote a single line in my notebook. Prepare for the reveal Friday. Family must be present. They've lived in the dark long enough. I smiled, regaining my composure, and began planning the most memorable family lunch they would ever experience. None of them, not Brian, not Amber, and certainly not Derek Vaughn, could imagine that the woman they thought only knew how to bake was actually holding the future of the entire tech industry in her hands. That evening, as I laid dinner on the table like always, Amber was buried in her phone, and Brian was absorbed in a printed financial report from work, not even glancing at the roast I had spent the entire afternoon preparing. "Can we all pause for a moment and listen to Mom?" I said gently, pouring lemonade into Amber's glass. Brian sighed but folded his paper. Amber didn't even look up. "Is this about me using my phone at the table again?" "No, I just want us to do something special together this week," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What, exactly?" Brian asked, already looking at his phone. "This Friday. I made lunch reservations downtown. It's a very special place. I want the whole family to come." Amber frowned. "Mom, I have dance rehearsal that afternoon. Probably can't make it." "You can skip just one. I already spoke with your coach and she agreed." I smiled, hiding my nerves. Amber's head snapped up. "You did what? You talked to her without asking me first?" Brian chimed in. "And I have a board meeting at lunch." I gently placed my fork down. "You don't. Your schedule is open. I called your assistant before making the reservation." Brian looked up, visibly thrown off. "You? Called my assistant?" "I wanted to make sure we could all be there," I replied calmly. Amber narrowed her eyes at me. So you've planned everything already, and we're just supposed to go along with it like it's the 1950s? I looked at her. Behind the protest, I could already see it. The curiosity blooming. Trust me, this lunch will be unforgettable. Wednesday morning, I received an email from Ethan. Derek Vaughn is holding an emergency press conference this afternoon. Looks like he's about to make his first move. I called Ethan immediately, my voice calm even though my heart was beating faster. Does he know anything? Not sure. But I think he's trying to control the narrative before Orion announces the acquisition. I stood up and walked toward the large window, watching the traffic swirl below like a mess of tangled thoughts. Let him talk. And Ethan, prepare our press release. But don't publish it until I say. I want to play this big. Ethan hesitated. Linda, are you sure? If he gets ahead in the media, it might impact the deal's value. Then, we won't wait until after his press conference. We'll interrupt it. I'll be there, in the room. Linda, I won't say a word, just show up. Right as he's loudly criticizing the anonymous buyer. Let him see my face. Let him realize he's just been outmaneuvered by the woman he once called a housewife with a hobby for junk stocks. Ethan let out a soft laugh. You really know how to create a moment. I smiled. I spent 7 years building everything in silence. Now it's time to let the echo speak. That Wednesday afternoon, I walked into the auditorium where the press conference was about to begin, just minutes before Derek took the stage. I sat in the third row, surrounded by reporters and investors. No one recognized me, just a woman in a simple blazer, hair neatly tied, holding a notepad. Derek appeared, launching into his speech with full confidence, hands gesturing emphatically with each point. And I want to make it clear that we are not easily deceived by anonymous entities, especially inexperienced players trying to elbow their way into major league deals. I crossed my legs, leaned back in my seat, and didn't take my eyes off him. As the speech transitioned into blame, criticism, and doubts about the legitimacy of the deal, I stood up. Calmly, I stepped out of the row and walked straight down the center aisle, each click of my heels against the floor sharp as a ticking clock. Derek saw me. He froze mid-sentence, eyes widening with a flicker of unmistakable panic. I offered only a small smile and a slight nod. No words were necessary. I walked out of the room under his stunned gaze and the murmurs trailing behind me. That evening, I sent a message to Ethan. Media update. Release the official statement confirming Orion Ventures' acquisition of 68% of Cybernova. Include the CEO's name. And Ethan, attach a photo from today's press conference. The game had begun. And I, the woman everyone thought was only good at baking cookies, had just made a move no one saw coming. Friday, 11:45 a.m. The black SUV rolled slowly into the Orion Tower parking garage, the private entrance reserved for the highest-level executives. Brian sat in the passenger seat, frowning at his surroundings. Amber stayed glued to her phone, typing texts at lightning speed. This doesn't look much like a restaurant, Brian remarked, glancing at his watch. Are you sure you didn't get the address wrong? I just smiled and opened the door. Let's go. Today's lunch is a little different. Amber stepped out, rolling her eyes. Please don't tell me you brought us to a bake sale. I'd rather go home. I said nothing, only led them toward the private elevator, swiped my access card and pressed the button for the 34th floor, the very top. When the elevator doors opened, they were met with a sleek marble hallway, leading to a set of large glass doors etched with Orion Ventures Boardroom, Executive Council. Brian stopped short. Linda, what is going on here? You'll find out soon, I replied, pushing the doors open. Inside, time seemed to stand still. All the board members were present. The large display screens were already lit up, showing a slide that read, Orion Cybernova merger. Official announcement. At the head of the table sat one empty chair. The CEO's seat. Derek Vaughn stood near a legal aid, his face flushing bright red as soon as he saw me. Brian and Amber were stunned speechless. I walked straight to the head of the table, paused, and turned to face my family. Everyone, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Linda Morgan, CEO and founder of Orion Ventures, and the person who's been overseeing the acquisition of Cybernova for the past year. Amber dropped her phone. The clatter echoed through the room. She stared at me, wide-eyed, like she was seeing a total stranger. Brian's jaw dropped. You? You're the CEO? Not starting today, since 7 years ago. The air in the room tightened like a drawn bowstring. Derek stepped forward, his voice trying to stay composed. There must be some mistake. She's just a homemaker. I met her at a charity event a few years back. Yes, I nodded. You were the one who laughed when I proposed a capital restructuring idea for your company. Told me I should focus on baking. I turned to Ethan, standing in the corner with his laptop ready. Display the legal documents. Ethan pressed a key. The screens shifted to show a series of digital documents, merger papers, financial statements, recorded negotiation transcripts, and an analysis of suspicious fund transfers from Cybernova's reserve account. Derek Vaughn, I said clearly, we have all the evidence showing you used company assets for personal investments, while reporting losses to shareholders. Derek snapped. You're fabricating this. I pulled a document from the file and slid it across the table to him. Payment bank statement, with your signature. Derek turned to his aide, now pale. The aide gave a reluctant nod, confirming it was real. You have 2 choices, Derek, I said, my voice calm but sharp. Sign the transfer agreement and step down quietly. Or let the press, the SEC, and your shareholders find out what you did with their pension fund. The room fell silent. You have 30 seconds. Derek looked around, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at me, then at Amber and Brian, still stunned. Fine, he growled. You win. He grabbed a pen and signed the document with force. Ethan swiftly collected and sealed the papers. I turned to the board. The deal is complete. Orion now officially owns 68% of Cybernova. We're entering a new era. The room erupted in applause, but I didn't look at them. I turned to Brian, the man who thought he was the backbone of the family, and Amber, the daughter who once said all I did was bake cookies. Brian exhaled, voice full of disbelief. How long have you kept this from us? I looked at him. 7 years. 7 years of running a corporation, cooking dinner, attending parent-teacher meetings, and helping with science projects. Amber whispered, Mom, you're a millionaire CEO? I smiled. No, sweetheart, I'm a billionaire. They stared at me in stunned silence, and I stood tall, more confident and steady than ever before. Now they knew. But the real question was, were they ever truly ready to find out who their mother really was? I tilted my head toward the glass window. The city below still buzzed, but on the 34th floor, everything had changed. The room slowly emptied after Derek Vaughn left, signing with defeat heavy on his face. Board members and legal advisors took their turns shaking my hand before exiting, leaving behind a silence so deep you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Brian and Amber still sat frozen, as if their bodies hadn't caught up with the shock that just hit them. Amber was the first to speak. Her voice was rough, as if it took everything she had just to get the words out. Mom, I said terrible things to you. I called you lazy, outdated, even made fun of you when you brought cookies to my room. I looked at her, those brown eyes now shimmering with tears, as if, for the first time, she truly saw me. Not the background mom, always available, but the woman behind everything. I never imagined you were the one behind all of this, that an entire company was holding its breath waiting for your decisions. Amber reached for a tissue, her voice cracking. I'm really sorry. You didn't deserve to be treated like that. I walked over to her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. I don't need you to apologize for not knowing. I just need you to understand. Sometimes, strength doesn't come from how loud you speak. but from daring to do the unexpected in silence. Amber let out a sob, then threw her arms around me. For the first time in years, that hug wasn't just a child's obligation. It was a real connection, where pride was set aside and understanding began to grow. Brian sat still, hands tightly clasped. He didn't speak until Amber left the room to wash her face. When it was just the two of us, he looked up, his eyes full of fatigue and disbelief. I don't even know where to begin. Linda, you did all this while I went on thinking I was the one carrying the family. I didn't say a word. I just sat in the chair beside him. I used to say you were lucky to stay at home. I bragged about my so-called role, while you quietly ran an empire. I wasn't just wrong. I was blind. I looked him in the eye, not with anger, just laying down the truth like a mirror in front of us. I didn't keep it a secret to beat you, and not to teach anyone a lesson. I kept it because I wanted to be seen as a mom, a wife, without needing a title or numbers to prove my worth. And I never saw that, Brian said, as if admitting something bigger than failure. I let my ego and pride blind me. Linda, I'm sorry. Not just for not knowing, but for not trying to understand. I gently squeezed his hand. I didn't need to say anything more. Some answers don't require words. Just a deep enough acceptance to begin again. A while later, Amber returned, eyes still red but looking lighter somehow. So, how long have you been running the company? She asked, curiosity gleaming behind her gaze, now mixed with something like admiration. Since you started middle school. Every morning after dropping you off, I'd head to the office. Every evening while making dinner, I was reviewing reports through a wireless earpiece. I smiled. I never neglected anyone. I just chose to wear more than one hat. And were you mad that we didn't know? Amber asked softly. I shook my head. No, because I understand. We tend to think the people closest to us are the easiest to see, but often they're the ones we overlook the most. The three of us sat in silence for a moment longer in the now empty boardroom, where just minutes ago lights had flashed and tension filled the air. Amber turned to me, half hesitant, half determined. Can you teach me? Not just about business, but how to be strong. Like you. I smiled, looking at her as if truly seeing her. Not just as a stubborn teenager, but as someone becoming something more. Of course, but first, do either of you want some lunch? Brian chuckled softly, standing up with a voice gentler than I'd heard in years. After today, I think I need more than lunch. I need to relearn how to be the partner you deserve. I wrapped my arm around Amber, looking at them, my family. Now, not perfect, but more honest than ever. Today, the mask I'd worn for 7 years was finally removed, and in the light, what I saw wasn't distance. It was hope. Hope for a new beginning, this time with eyes opened and hearts ready to listen. A week after that fateful meeting, the atmosphere in our home had completely changed. No more indifferent glances at dinner, no more sighs from Brian when I reminded him to help clear the table, and, most importantly, no more snide remarks from Amber every time I walked into her room with a plate of cookies. In their place came questions, curiosity, admiring glances I'd only seen before when Amber talked about social media celebrities. Now, when I stood in the kitchen making dinner, Amber stood beside me, not to complain, but to observe. Mom, were you scared when you negotiated with Derek Vaughn? She asked one evening while I kneaded bread dough. I looked up at her and smiled gently. Of course, I just didn't show it. Fear is part of stepping into unknown territory, but if you let it take over, you'll never move past your comfort zone. Amber nodded, clearly taking it to heart. Will you teach me? Everything? How to run a company, how to stay grounded, and how to make sure no one ever underestimates me again. I placed a hand on her shoulder and gave it a light squeeze. I'll teach you everything, as long as you're willing to learn. But remember, being strong doesn't mean never needing anyone. It means knowing when to stand up and when to listen. Brian changed too. He began listening more, not just at home, but even in our conversations about finances, something he once thought was too complex for women. Now, every morning, he brings me coffee and asks, "What can I help you with today?" A simple question, but each word marks growth. One Monday morning, as I prepared materials for the board meeting, Amber walked into my office holding a notebook. "Mom, I want to work at your company. Not just visit. I want to intern. I know I'm not great yet, but I want to start from the bottom, no special treatment. I want to really learn." I stared at her for a long moment, overwhelmed by a strange mix of pride, surprise, and above all, trust. My daughter finally understood the value of quiet effort. "Then you'll start in market research. No using the last name Morgan. No one at the company will know you're my daughter. Deal?" Amber nodded firmly. "Deal. And Mom, I want to buy my own lunch every day. I don't want anyone thinking I'm being sponsored." I laughed. "All right. But I'm still slipping a cookie into your bag each morning. That's just who I am." The change didn't stop at home. Even the office at Orion felt it. I no longer hid behind vague email aliases or joined meetings with my camera off. I stood before the entire team and introduced myself. Linda Morgan, founder, CEO, and also the mom of a teenage girl who once thought her mother was too boring for social media. I used to stay in the background because I thought successful women would always be judged harder. But today, I choose to show up, not to prove anything, but to remind other women, you don't have to choose between career and family. You can be both, and be great at both. That speech spread across corporate media platforms. Within a week, our inbox was flooded with congratulations, and Amber proudly brought the Forbes magazine featuring me to school so I can finally show off my mom without cringing. Brian was no longer the man at the head of the table, assuming he was the center. Now he's the one who checks in with me before every investment decision, and sometimes simply washes the dishes beside me after dinner. No complaints. "I'm still getting used to you being a CEO," he told me one evening as we sat in the backyard, sipping tea under the city lights. But being married to the strongest woman I've ever met, that makes me prouder than any title I've ever had. I leaned my head on his shoulder and smiled. I don't need to be celebrated. I just need to be seen. And now, finally, I am truly seen. A new journey begins. No more hiding. No more silence. I'm still the CEO. Still the mom who wakes up early to make breakfast. Still the wife who keeps our family balanced. Summer arrived, bringing sunny mornings and a lively buzz through Orion Tower. But this year held special meaning for me. Not because of record-breaking revenue or the finalized Cybernova acquisition, but because for the first time, I walked into the office with something more valuable than success. A family truly walking beside me. Amber, or rather Amber West, the name she chose for her internship at Orion, was busy preparing her first presentation. She refused any special treatment, insisting on being evaluated just like every other intern. When I asked why she chose that name, Amber smiled playfully. "I picked Grandma's last name. She was the first person who taught me women can do anything they want. After you, of course." Every morning, the two of us left the house together, carrying coffee and stories we hadn't finished the night before. Brian, now working part-time as a financial advisor, usually saw us off at the door, reminding us, "Knock 'em dead in that exec meeting today, hun." And Amber, don't let anyone doubt your talent just because you're her daughter. At the Monday morning meeting, Amber presented a plan to build a more user-friendly interface for older adults. An idea I had initially dismissed as a side topic, but watching her stand before the leadership team, confident and composed, I saw myself in her. The early days, nerves trembling, speaking in front of people who didn't believe I had anything beyond a neat ponytail and a polite smile. "The development team has started testing the new layout," she concluded, "and initial feedback shows a 32% increase in satisfaction. We're not just building advanced technology, we're making it accessible. whether you're 18 or 80. The room applauded. I didn't say a word, I just looked at her, heart full. The girl who once called me a boring mom was now proving to the entire company that she didn't need the Morgan name to earn respect. That evening, as we gathered for dinner, Brian suddenly stood up, holding a small box. I don't think I've ever truly said this. Linda, thank you for not giving up on me. And thank you for giving us a second chance. Not just in our marriage, but in how we parent. He opened the box to reveal a small gold nameplate engraved with Linda Morgan, CEO, Mom Inspiration. Amber let out a whistle. This needs to be hung right outside the main conference room. I laughed, eyes welling up. Thank you, but I think I'll keep it in the kitchen. To remind myself that even while running an empire, I'm still the best cookie baker in this house. Amber wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her head on my shoulder. And the most amazing woman I've ever known. Brian nodded. We've all learned something important. That strength isn't about the loudest voice, but the quiet persistence. And sometimes, the one holding the whole family together is the one we underestimated the most. I looked at them, my husband, my daughter, and felt more at peace than ever before. No more roles weighing us down, no more distance. We were a family. Imperfect, but honest, and finally learning how to listen. A month later, Orion hosted its annual summit, the first time the full executive board and their families were invited. I stood on stage, behind me the words, "Technology leads, people make the difference." When I founded Orion, I didn't just dream of breakthrough innovation. I dreamed of a place where anyone could shine, regardless of gender, age, or where they started. I paused. I was once dismissed just because I was a mom. But being a mother taught me how to handle crises, how to see value in each person, and how to build trust. Qualities every CEO should master. The room was silent, then erupted in applause. I saw Amber in the front row, eyes glistening. Brian smiling, proud. After the summit, reporters surrounded me. One asked, "What's your secret to running a company while still being a present mother?" I answered without hesitation. It's knowing I never had to choose. I can be a CEO, lead a billion-dollar meeting at noon, and still be home in time to bake cookies at night. And both are equally important. That night, as I stood in my familiar kitchen, pulling a batch of cookies from the oven, Amber walked in, picked one up, and took a bite. "Is this a victory cookie, Mom?" I smiled, shaking my head. "No, sweetheart, this is a family cookie. And that's always the best kind." From a mother once overlooked in her own home, I quietly built an empire no one saw coming. That journey taught me that a woman's worth isn't defined by the roles others give her, but by her resilience, wisdom, and the love she pours into her family. I no longer hide behind an apron. I'm Linda Morgan, a mother, a wife, and a CEO, and I'm proud to be all of them, completely. What do you think about Linda's journey and the transformation within her family? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring everyday stories from modern family life. I spent 2.5 years planning my dream wedding. Every detail was carefully thought out. From the romantic beachfront venue in Charleston, South Carolina, to the exquisite menu featuring all my favorite dishes. Andrew, my fiancé, and I had been in love for nearly 4 years, and I had always believed we would have a happy marriage. Everything seemed perfect, except for one major issue. Andrew's parents had never accepted me. His mother, Vivian, always carried herself with an air of elegance and coldness. The first time we met, she scanned me from head to toe, as if evaluating whether I was worthy of joining their family. His father, William, was quieter but always distant. He spent most of his time bragging about his investments and the exclusive clubs he was a member of. I didn't come from a prestigious family. My parents were hardworking people, and I was proud of that. I had no interest in elite circles, extravagant dinners, or luxury trips meant for showing off. I loved Andrew for who he was, not for his family or wealth. But to Vivian and William, That didn't matter. They always believed their son could find someone better. Andrew used to tell me not to worry. They'll come around. He reassured me every time I expressed my concerns, but I knew it was an empty promise. Over the years, they had never changed the way they saw me, and I was beginning to realize that I wasn't just marrying Andrew. I was stepping into a family that never wanted me there. Still, I tried. We sent out invitations, picked out wedding flowers, tried on dresses, and sampled cakes. I spent hours meticulously planning every detail of our big day, while Vivian remained indifferent to everything I did. But that didn't stop me from looking forward to the moment I would officially become Andrew's wife. And then, just 1 week before the wedding, everything fell apart. I still remember that afternoon vividly, exactly 1 week before our wedding, when Andrew showed up with a slightly forced smile. "My parents just planned a trip," he said, avoiding my gaze. I set my teacup down, frowning slightly. "Now?" "Yeah, just a short getaway to Palm Beach. They said it's a family tradition. A little vacation before someone gets married." I had never heard him mention this tradition before, and if it was so important, why hadn't they brought it up earlier? "Why so last minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Andrew shrugged. "They just want to spend some time with me before everything changes. You know, like parents wanting one last moment with their son before he becomes a married man." It sounded reasonable, but something felt off. I stared at him, searching for any sign of hesitation, and just as I feared, Andrew avoided my eyes. "Can I come?" I asked, half joking. He laughed, but it wasn't genuine. "You know my mom wouldn't like that." A wave of coldness washed over me. Of course, Vivian would never allow me to come. In her eyes, I had never been part of their family. "How long?" I asked. 4 days. Leaving Thursday, back on Sunday." I clenched my hands under the table. 4 days, right before the wedding? Strange. But I didn't want to turn it into an argument, especially since Andrew already seemed set on going. I smiled and nodded. "Then go, but come back soon." Andrew kissed my forehead, as if reassuring me, then quickly left. A few days later, he left for the trip, and by Saturday night, everything collapsed. I was sitting on my couch, reviewing the guest list one last time, when I got a call from Sophie, my best friend. "Joe," her voice was tense. "He's here." I frowned. "Who?" "Andrew." My heart skipped a beat. "What? What do you mean?" "I'm at the Royal Lounge, a high-end bar in downtown Palm Beach. I swear, Andrew is here, and you won't believe who he's with." My throat went dry. "Who?" "His parents and a girl. Younger than you, blonde, looks rich and stuck up." Heat spread through my body. "Are you sure it's him?" "I saw him with my own eyes, Joe. Not only that, but all 3 of them, Vivian, William, and that girl, are laughing and chatting with Andrew like they're a perfect family. And he doesn't look uncomfortable or anything." The world around me blurred. "Did you see them doing anything inappropriate?" I asked, my voice tight. Sophie hesitated. Andrew put his hand on her waist as they walked into the VIP section. I gripped my phone tightly. "Joe?" Sophie's voice was filled with concern. "I'm here. Do you want me to do anything? Take pictures, record them, confront him?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. If Sophie had seen them, chances were other people had too. If this was really what I thought it was, I needed proof. "I need evidence," I whispered. "Take pictures, videos, anything you can." "I got it," Sophie said immediately. "I'll do it now." I sat frozen on the couch, staring at my phone as if it could somehow give me a reasonable explanation. So this was the real reason for the sudden trip. Not to spend time with their son before the wedding, but to introduce him to a new candidate, a girl they deemed more suitable than me. Who was she? An old acquaintance? A family friend? Or someone they had deliberately set him up with? I closed my eyes, trying to suppress the anger rising inside me. If this was real, if Andrew was truly involved in this, then it wasn't just my wedding that was over. My entire life was about to change forever. I didn't sleep at all that night. My phone sat on the table, filled with Sophie's messages, along with a few hastily taken photos. The quality wasn't crystal clear, but it was enough to recognize Andrew and that girl sitting close together, laughing like they had known each other for ages. In another photo, Vivian was resting her hand affectionately on the girl's shoulder, as if she had already welcomed her into the family. I couldn't believe it. But anger wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed solid, undeniable proof. The next morning, I called Mark Reynolds, a private investigator Sophie had once hired when her sister suspected she was being scammed in business. He picked up on the first ring, his voice calm and professional. "I need to investigate someone," I said bluntly. Mark wasn't surprised. "Tell me what you know, and I'll take care of the rest." I sent him the location of the bar, the hotel where Andrew and his family were staying, and the photos Sophie had taken. I wanted to know who that girl was, why she was with Andrew and his family, and most importantly, what they had been doing throughout the trip. Mark promised to update me as soon as he had anything. 48 hours passed in absolute tension. I didn't text or call Andrew. I waited. And then, on Tuesday morning, my phone rang. "Mark, I have information." An hour later, I sat in my usual cafe with Mark, my stomach in knots. He placed a folder in front of me, along with a USB drive. "I think you'll want to see for yourself." I opened the folder. The first page contained the personal details of the girl. Her name was Lauren Davis, 26 years old, the daughter of a wealthy businessman in Florida. Private school education, involved in multiple social events. The kind of person Vivian and William would undoubtedly consider worthy of their family. I turned to the next page. The first image. Andrew and Lauren sitting close together at an upscale restaurant. Far too intimate to be dismissed as coincidence. The second image. Vivian talking to Lauren at the bar, with William nodding along as if agreeing to a plan. The third image. Andrew and Lauren walking out of a jewelry store together. My stomach twisted. "There's more," Mark said, sliding the USB toward me. "I have a few video clips, especially this one." He opened his laptop, plugged in the USB, and pressed play. On the screen, Vivian and Lauren sat in the hotel bar, cocktails in hand, their voices clear through the hidden microphone Mark had used. Vivian leaned toward Lauren, speaking with absolute confidence. "As long as you do your part well, I'll handle the rest. Josephine was a mistake. She doesn't belong in this family. We just need to make Andrew see that." Lauren let out a soft laugh. "I have a feeling he already has." I felt my entire body freeze. Mark paused the video, looking at me with sympathy. "Vivian and William didn't just take Andrew on a trip. They orchestrated this. Lauren wasn't a coincidence. They planned for her to replace you." My heart turned cold. I didn't know what I had expected. Maybe an explanation, a possibility that this was all a misunderstanding. But no, everything was crystal clear. Andrew hadn't just been led into this. He had willingly participated. I stared at the laptop screen. This wasn't just about a trip. This was a carefully planned betrayal. I clenched my fists. "If you want to dig deeper," Mark offered, "I can." I shook my head, taking a deep breath. "No need, I have enough. Enough to know I could never marry Andrew. Enough to realize this family would never accept me. And most importantly, enough to make sure they knew I wouldn't quietly disappear. Their game was over. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't have to wait long. Andrew returned on Tuesday night, a day later than planned, and I knew why. He didn't want to face me. When he stepped into my apartment, the air immediately grew heavy. He lingered near the door, as if ready to leave at any moment. "Josephine," he said, his voice tense. "We need to talk." I nodded calmly, already knowing exactly what was coming. I pulled out a chair, motioning for him to sit. Andrew hesitated before lowering himself onto the seat across from me, his eyes avoiding mine. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone light enough not to alarm him, but sharp enough to make him uneasy. He exhaled, rubbing his hands together. I think we should take a break. I stared at him. A break? Andrew nodded, still avoiding my gaze. I just think maybe we need to take some time to think. Everything is moving so fast, and I'm not sure if this is the right decision. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Then I smiled. How interesting, I said, reaching for a folder on the table and placing it in front of him. Because I just got some information about your trip. Andrew's entire body tensed. Take a look. I gestured. He opened the folder. The first image, Andrew and Lauren at the restaurant, sitting so close their shoulders nearly touched. The second image, Vivian smiling at Lauren in the bar, an expression full of meaning. The third image, Andrew and Lauren leaving a jewelry store together. I watched as horror slowly spread across his face while he flipped through the pages, eventually reaching the last section. A transcript of text messages Mark had retrieved from Lauren's phone. Messages from Vivian. Just spend time with him. We'll take care of the rest. Andrew swallowed hard, flipping to the final page. A screenshot from the video at the bar where his mother promised Lauren that this wedding would never happen. I crossed my arms, watching him. Do you have anything to say? I asked, my voice steady. Andrew set the folder down, his hands shaking. Josephine, I can explain. I raised an eyebrow. Explain? Explain how your mother arranged a meeting with another woman right before our wedding? Or explain how you let it happen so easily? His hands clenched into fists, his expression flustered. I didn't do anything on purpose, he blurted out. I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't want to make my mother angry. I didn't want to cause trouble. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Keep the peace? I repeated, my gaze sharp. You think letting your family sabotage your own wedding is keeping the peace? Andrew fell silent. And at that moment, the door swung open. Vivian walked in as if she owned the place, followed closely by William. In her hand was a notebook, probably my wedding planner, something that no longer meant anything. Can we talk like adults? Vivian said, her voice carrying its usual authority. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Oh, you want to talk? Great. I have all evening. She glanced at the folder on the table, her eyes narrowing slightly. This is ridiculous. Josephine, you're overreacting. I let out a light laugh. Overreacting? You mean I'm not supposed to react when my fiancé's mother hires another woman to replace me right before my wedding? William spoke coldly. We only want what's best for Andrew. We don't think you're the right long-term choice. A cold fury spread through me. I turned to Andrew. Did you know about this? He was silent for too long. And that said everything. I took a deep breath, locking eyes with Vivian. You think you get to choose your son's wife? She gave a small, dismissive smile. I'm just making sure my son doesn't make a mistake. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it. A message from Sophie. Lauren is still in Palm Beach. She just bragged to her friends that Andrew's family made sure this wedding would never happen. I set my phone down and looked directly at Vivian. Well, I have good news for you, I said, my voice calm but carrying the weight of a verdict. You got what you wanted. I stood up, grabbed the folder and slid it toward Andrew. This wedding is off. Andrew's face went pale. Josephine! I'm done, Andrew. I held his gaze for a long moment, letting my words sink in. I'm not marrying someone who can't stand up for himself. I'm not marrying into a family I'll have to fight against for the rest of my life. I turned to Vivian and William. Congratulations, Andrew is free of me. But let's see if anyone actually wants to be a part of a family like this. And with that, I walked out of my own apartment, leaving Andrew, Vivian, and William standing there in silence. I slammed the door behind me, taking a deep breath, but the air felt thick. I was shaking, but not from sadness. There were no more tears, no more pain. Only a quiet, simmering rage, pulsing through every part of me. I couldn't stop here. I needed to know the full truth. I grabbed my phone and dialed Sophie. She answered on the first ring. You okay, Joe? I'm fine, I said firmly. But I need to know more. Lauren, what else did she say? Sophie hesitated for a second, then sighed. Joe, you won't believe this. Try me. Last night, Lauren was bragging to her friends that Vivian paid her to go on this trip. And I don't just mean covering flights and hotels. There was cash, gifts, and a promise of a secure future if she did her part right. I felt my chest tighten. Her part? Yeah, she said Vivian promised that if she could get Andrew interested, she'd make sure Lauren had a place in the family. Basically, they wanted to swap you out for her. I clenched my jaw. Everything became painfully clear. This wasn't just a casual trip. This wasn't just some new friend Andrew happened to meet. This had been orchestrated from the start. You're sure about this, Sophie? Joe, I recorded it. I went still for a few seconds. She continued. I left my phone on the table when Lauren was talking. I got her voice, crystal clear, talking about how Vivian promised to push you aside. I put my phone on speaker, opened my laptop, and downloaded the recording from Sophie. Pressing play, Lauren's voice came through, clear, undeniable. Vivian told me Andrew wouldn't marry Josephine. She said I just had to make him hesitate a little. Once the wedding was called off, she'd take care of the rest. Silence. I let out a quiet laugh, but inside I was burning. I stopped the recording and took a deep breath. I think, I said slowly, it's time Andrew heard this. I didn't warn him before showing up at his place. I didn't want to give him time to prepare a lie. When the door opened, Andrew froze at the sight of me. Joe, he frowned. I thought we were done talking. I gave a cold smile and pulled out my phone. Oh no, we're not done, Andrew. I pressed play. Lauren's voice echoed through his apartment. Just had to make him hesitate a little. Once the wedding was called off, she'd take care of the rest. Andrew's face went from pale to deep red. What is this? He stammered. Proof. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Were you going to tell me your mother paid Lauren to seduce you? Or were you just going to stay quiet, like every other time? Andrew pressed his lips together but said nothing. I stepped into the house, leaving the door wide open behind me. And you know what's funny? I tilted my head. The whole world is about to find out about this. I pulled out a new folder and slammed it onto the table. This is everything. Photos, messages, payment receipts from your mother to Lauren. I crossed my arms. So, Andrew, do you have anything left to say? He swallowed hard. Joe, I didn't know. I laughed. You didn't know? You didn't think it was suspicious when Lauren conveniently showed up right before our wedding? You didn't realize your mother was manipulating you? He closed his eyes, rubbing his forehead. Oh, I didn't want to disappoint her, he muttered. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you didn't care about hurting me as long as your mother was happy? I crossed my arms tighter. He stayed silent. And that was my answer. I took a step back, as if I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. You never stood by me, I said slowly. You let them do this, and you didn't stop them. Andrew didn't argue. I shook my head and picked up the folder. Fine, I said, a faint cold smile on my lips. If you won't pick a side, I'll pick for you. Andrew frowned. What does that mean? I turned toward the door, glancing at him one last time. It means, I said, my voice sharp, your mother is about to regret messing with me. And with that, I walked out, leaving Andrew drowning in his own silence. I didn't just walk away quietly. If Vivian thought she could manipulate everything to her liking without consequences, she was wrong. I spent the entire night planning, and the next morning I sent a group message to Andrew, Vivian, William, and Lauren. We need an emergency meeting at the wedding venue at 2 p.m. If you want to clear things up before it's too late, be there. I didn't explain further. I wanted them to worry, to ask themselves 1,000 questions. And I knew for sure that Vivian wouldn't be able to resist an invitation like this. The wedding venue was supposed to be the place where I exchanged vows with Andrew. But today, it was just a stage where I would expose everything they had done. Vivian and William arrived first, walking in with their usual air of superiority, as if they were still in control. Lauren followed shortly after, her wavy blonde hair perfectly styled, her eyes glinting with smug confidence. And then Andrew walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. But I didn't care anymore. I didn't waste time. Once they were all seated, I turned on the projector. The first image appeared on the screen, Vivian sitting at the hotel bar in Palm Beach, speaking to Lauren. "As long as you do your part well, I'll handle the rest." Vivian stiffened. William leaned back in his chair, his face hardening. Andrew leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on the screen. The next image, Lauren and Andrew outside a jewelry store, laughing and talking closely. Lauren let out a small laugh, crossing her legs, her voice full of defiance. "So what? You're just trying to turn this into some unnecessary scandal?" I raised an eyebrow and pressed play on the next video clip. On the screen, Lauren's voice rang out, chillingly clear. "Vivian told me Andrew wouldn't marry Josephine. She said I just had to make him hesitate a little. Once the wedding was called off, she'd take care of the rest." Silence filled the room. Lauren froze, but tried to maintain her composure. "You have no right to invade my privacy." I laughed, shaking my head. "Privacy? You tried to destroy my wedding, and now you want to talk about privacy?" Andrew lowered his head, rubbing his forehead. I turned to him. "Did you know about this?" He didn't answer immediately, and that alone was an answer. Vivian still wasn't ready to back down. "Josephine, don't be so emotional. We were simply introducing Andrew to better options. What's so wrong about that?" I clenched my fists, locking eyes with her. "What's wrong is that you don't get to make that decision for your son. What's wrong is that you can't respect his choices. And most importantly, you thought I would just sit back and tolerate it." William finally spoke, his voice low and firm. "We were only thinking about Andrew's long-term future." Andrew lifted his head, looking at his father. "Long-term future?" His voice wavered. "By arranging for me to betray the woman I was supposed to marry?" Vivian's grip tightened on the straps of her purse, but she said nothing. I turned to Andrew, my voice calm but sharp. "Do you see it now, Andrew? This is how they treat you. Like a puppet, a piece on a chessboard for them to move however they please." Andrew swallowed hard, but still didn't say a word in my defense. Lauren clicked her tongue, then let out a quiet chuckle. "Well, either way, you're not really a problem anymore." She shrugged. "Andrew's already made his choice." I gave her a small, knowing smile and nodded. "You're right." I turned to Andrew, holding his gaze for a few seconds. "You had so many chances to stand by me," I said, my voice void of anger, filled only with pure disappointment. "And you never did." Andrew opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. I shut my laptop and picked up my bag. "Then go ahead and do what you do best, Andrew," I said, my voice light but weighted with meaning. "Stay silent and let your mother decide for you." And with that, I walked out of the room without looking back. No more wedding, no more Andrew, no more toxic family. And for the first time in months, I felt freer than ever. I left the wedding venue without a single glance back. No final words, no further explanations. Everything was already crystal clear. I didn't need to hear any more justifications. What I had done wasn't just canceling a wedding. I had freed myself from a toxic family, a man who never had the courage to stand up for me, and a future I had almost been trapped in. A few hours later, I sat in my apartment, reading messages from friends and family, people who had just heard that the wedding was off. Some were shocked, some were furious on my behalf, but what surprised me most was that nearly everyone said I had made the right decision. And when I opened Instagram, I knew immediately that the drama wasn't over. Lauren, just as I had expected, couldn't keep quiet. She posted a selfie at a luxury bar holding a glass of wine, with a caption dripping with arrogance. Not everyone is meant for high society. Some people simply don't meet the standards. In the comments, people from Andrew's social circle were already asking questions, trying to figure out what had happened. Some defended me, some tried to stay neutral, but regardless of what they said, the rumors had already spread. I sighed, but not out of sadness, just sheer exhaustion at their shamelessness. Within a week, Andrew's family's reputation collapsed in a way they never saw coming. The high-profile wedding guests, the influential business and social figures, began to distance themselves from Vivian and William as the truth unraveled. Turns out, not everyone approved of a family that treated marriage like a business transaction. Some of Andrew's closest friends even cut ties with him, not because they were particularly loyal to me, but because they didn't want to associate with a man who had no backbone, someone who let his mother dictate his life. Vivian desperately tried to regain control of the situation. She hosted a private event to show that their family was still intact, but no one cared anymore. No one wanted to be labeled as someone who supported a staged, manipulative scheme to break up a wedding. And Lauren? She lasted exactly 3 weeks with Andrew. 3 weeks. At first, she was by his side constantly, enjoying the attention from those curious about the scandal. But when she realized Andrew had no control over his family's finances, when she understood there was no extravagant wedding, no elite status to claim, she left without a word. Andrew was left alone, with a disgraced family and a life that was no longer his to control. And me? I didn't spend time crying over what was lost because I lost nothing at all. Instead, on the day I was supposed to walk down the aisle, I did something I never thought I would. I threw a non-wedding party. My friends showed up in full force, bringing wine, cake, and glamorous outfits as if we were attending the most extravagant celebration. There were no tears, no regrets, just laughter, music, and an overwhelming sense of freedom. I wore a deep blue silk dress, the one I had chosen to replace my wedding gown, and stood in the middle of my living room, a glass of wine in hand. Sophie looked at me and smiled. "How does it feel?" I thought for a moment, then grinned wider than ever. I've never felt better. And that wasn't a lie. I had escaped a disastrous marriage before it even began. I no longer had to fight for a family that would never respect me. I no longer had to be with a man who lacked the courage to stand up for his own love. I lost nothing. In fact, I had just reclaimed everything. As I cut into the wedding cake, the only thing left from what had been planned. I didn't feel heartache or bitterness. I laughed, scooped a bite with my fork, and savored it. "Sweeter than any wedding," I murmured. And as the music played, as I danced with my friends under the glittering lights, I realized the most important thing of all. I had won. Not because I had gotten revenge on Vivian or humiliated Lauren, not because Andrew was left in the loneliness he deserved, but because I had chosen myself. And that was the greatest victory of my life. Josephine's story is not just a lesson in love and betrayal, it's proof of the power of knowing your worth. In real life, many people stay trapped in toxic relationships, afraid of being alone or unwilling to walk away after investing so much time and emotion. But the most important thing isn't holding on to someone who doesn't deserve you. It's having the courage to let go when necessary. Sometimes, losing what you thought you needed is exactly how you find yourself in a better future. What do you think about Josephine's story? If you were in her shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more compelling stories about family, love, and life's valuable lessons.